about a 42 stone man. But yesterday I was talking with people who were 39 stone, 30 stone, 22, 19. Nobody's honing in on their conditions. So I like to kind of generalise as best I can about all people who are suffering. Michael, good morning. Thanks for taking the call. I know you've taken some time out this morning. So I won't keep you too long. There was an excellent text earlier on this morning that was talking about sugar and was talking about gluten and Coca-Cola, sugar allowances, diet drinks, and it really just plays into your court, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and I was listening to your kind of brief chat there about the lady with the type 1 diabetes and the type 2 diabetes. There is the genetic aspect of type 1 diabetes, and some people, it's not necessarily dietary related, but definitely diet affects it. So people have type 1 diabetes, and kids can be born with that because of the genetic aspect to it. And in actual fact, that's probably well in the minority. But one of the key things about that is that even if you have type 1 diabetes, it's important to understand that the insulin itself doesn't resolve the problem, while the insulin itself helps the people with type 1 diabetes. Ultimately, if you don't still rectify your diet and get good exercise and all of that, then you do end up with possible conditions, renal failure, poor circulatory issues like gangrene, eyesight failure, and a combination of different things. So just people have often this myth that when they use insulin that it resolves the problem. But ultimately, as you said, as you pointed out, type 2 diabetes, absolutely a lot of this, in fact, it's not all of it, and I would say pretty much all of it, and is really contributed to by our lifestyle. There's no doubt about it.
I just need to be very conscious this morning that we don't overly turn into medical FM.
Yeah.
That everything I do or everywhere I turn, somebody's got a medical condition to blame for it. I don't want to dismiss people's medical conditions, but I'm really trying to hone in on how people get into the shape that they're in,
Correct.
Who's responsible for it, and how it can be fixed.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's absolutely back to lifestyle. I mean, I was just reading there recently where we see children now at the age of 8 being diagnosed with blood pressure, and then we see the prescription of medication where there are no trials of these drugs around children, and we see that associated specifically with excess weight. Now, I often say to people, when you go to buy jeans or trousers or a skirt or whatever the case may be, there are two sizes you look for. One is the length and the other is the waist. Now, the waist is determined by the amount of weight you have in your body. So if you measure the diameter of your jeans, if it's a 34, 36, 38, 40, whatever it is, when that size of your waist, WAIST, is going to be, or WAIT is going to be equivalent to the WASTE in your body. So basically, it's what we're putting into our bodies is what's contributing to all our problems. And certainly stress, Neil. I mean, if I can give you a little brief on it, kind of when we are stressed out all the time, or even if we're not stressed, but if we're stressed out all the time and we're taking in the wrong foods, and they're high sugar, then certainly we're going to find ourselves with that stress state, with the wrong type of food. Our metabolism is going to become affected. We're not going to metabolize that waste. Then what starts to happen is we overload on the sugars. Then we're going to affect our blood sugars. Automatically, we're going to produce inflammation. From there, we're going to start getting tired, adding more sugars. From there, our blood pressure is going to go up, and so on. From there, we're going to be producing inflammatories, getting inflamed muscles, and suddenly our body's ballooning basically out of proportion. And next thing, then what happens? We can't absorb our nutrients, upping the sugars more for the energy, and now we're going to be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And then the implications are huge because it just doesn't stop there.
And when you say sugars, what do you mean when you use the term sugars?
I mean, anything sugar. I mean, what I always often say to people is this: if it's white, it's sugar. So that's what we have to think about. Sugar, people think sugar is metabolized as a sweet. It's not. Sugar is metabolized as a fat. So, I often think about it when I'm looking in a restaurant, and I'm sitting down and I'm having lunch or whatever, and I was just thinking about it yesterday, sitting down having lunch, and I see the restaurant is full, and I see most people around me drinking some soft drink, whatever it is. And if you were to imagine that you're sitting down eating a meal and that you have a bowl of sugar alongside you, which is technically what these soft drinks are, and every time you have your mouthful of food that you're now dipping into the bowl of sugar, which is the drink, and you're putting it in with it. This is what we're talking about. And then we see sugars in foods, and ultimately it's the refined carbohydrates, it's the actual fat, chocolate, the sweet
that's fine.
sugar.
What if I'm having the chicken and the pasta or whatever, and I have a Diet Coke or a Diet Pepsi?
Not good. Not good. Absolutely not good. I mean, why would you need to take sugar with your food? If you really want to drink with your food, and the thing is, the kind of real key to this is if you masticate your food, if you chew your food properly in your mouth, then you'll absorb the nutrients better. You're producing enzymes in your gut to break that food down. Now, if you drink, for example, first of all, if you drink just normal water with your food, then you're diluting the digestive juices. So you're just washing the food down. So you really have to chew your food right. Sip water if you're going to drink with your lunch or whatever it may be. And then afterwards, if you want to drink, that's fine. But if you're washing your food down, it's just not good because I said to you, you're diluting the digestive juices. And you're not getting the proper absorption of your food either. So therefore, we crave the sugars after because we're not getting the energy from the food. And if you have a tendency to be overweight or if you have a tendency to restore a lot of waste, because I don't really like the idea of obesity, it's a misused word. I think if you have a lot of waste built up in your body, then you're more prone to go for sugar. But certainly, you're far better off if you're going to eat your food, sip water, afterwards drink water. But if you have this vision of yourself sitting down, eating your meals, and drinking soft drinks, and technically putting a spoon into your sugar bowl and eating it with it, then you are heading for problems as you talked about that earlier on.
So if you're talking to, if I have been in the past talking with people, like say for instance a guy who's 42 stone who drinks two liter bottles of Coke, whether it's diet or not, that's where the damage is being done, isn't it?
Absolutely. Look, we need to waken up out of illusion here. You know, we need to look. What I believe is that parents, particularly in children, when I see this, I have never seen as many children in my life suffering from inflammatory type disorders and depressive type symptoms and increased type 2 diabetes and even type 1 when there isn't even a genetic aspect to it. And when I would say to parents, have a look in your trolley, wherever you're getting your food, and ask yourself the question, am I investing in my child's illness, or am I investing in my own illness, or am I investing in my health? If you're putting sugar into your body, and a recent article that has been published by in the New Scientist says, stopping cancer cells guzzling sugar is the way to heal it. And I think that's very true. Sugar feeds every disease known to man. If you put sugar into a fire, it inflames. If you put sugar into your body, it's an inflammation, and it's no good taking anti-inflammatories. You have to really stop the sugar going in. And I would say to people that if they decided right now to start to reduce sugar intake and cut it back, their quality of life would improve hugely. They'd feel better. They wouldn't be half as hyper. They would be more relaxed. They'd have less inflammation and pain. And then you see the body would start to function normally. It would start to heal normally. But sugar definitely is contributing hugely. It's more addictive, Neil, than heroin or coke. That's an established fact.
Sugar?
Sugar is the most addictive substance in the world today. There's a huge amount of sugar being consumed by each individual. I think it's something like 200 pounds per person per annum. So there's a huge implication when we're metabolizing that, because it's metabolized at the fat, and then as I said to you, we have to produce neurohormone or a hormone to break that down, insulin. And if we cannot no longer produce that to break it down, then we have to take it synthetically in the form of glucophage, diamorphin, we have to take the insulin.
Okay, well that's when you medicate, to counteract it. But so you're talking about like sugars in the sugar bowl, it's in all of the soft drinks, it's in much of the fast food. There's an awful lot of natural sugars, even in vegetables and stuff. You can't eliminate sugar. I mean, you would have to just be completely and utterly vegan, and even at that, there probably is sugar.
Well, the thing is, it's more to do with the likes of the soft drinks, the chocolates, the sweets, the biscuits, the cakes, all that kind of stuff. That's what that is the biggest challenge to us. I mean, it's as much addictive. It's as much addictive, as it is cigarettes.
Yeah. What happens then with somebody who has, say, for instance, an addiction to addiction is the wrong word, to bread and to white bread and to flour and to gluten?
Yeah, I've often talked about this, and I see this more so with kids. And even for adults, when people talk, and I heard you mention earlier on about thyroid function issues, there's no doubt about it that thyroid function issues have a huge influence in metabolism, but the thyroid isn't the cause of the weight gain. It's more than that. If the gut is not functioning right, and I genuinely believe that the vast majority of people are gluten sensitive, may not be celiac, may not be gluten intolerant, but gluten sensitive. Gluten antibodies attack the thyroid and affect its function. Now, the thing is that what I have found is that if you eat for children, for example, what we know is that gluten in bread, particularly white bread, that kind of, if there's any sensitivity to gluten in children in particular, and I know this to be in adults as well because I've seen the change. The gluten itself, if it's not being processed, we produce an enzyme in the gut called DPP4, that enzyme that we produce in the gut to break the gluten down, if we're not producing it, the gluten converts to a morphine-based chemical. That morphine-based chemical creates that type of brain fog. It creates that kind of headachy type of feeling, that lethargy type feeling, and it's very important that we minimize that as we're going through those types of
But
symptoms.
hold on a second. How come the French, who eat wagon loads of bread, they don't seem to have any issue with it?
Yeah, but I think a lot of it is to do with, our kind of more West side, and particularly the Irish diet, because we are very high in white. The different cultures have different ways of looking at it, and some cultures are used to drinking wine, but we know that the intake of fat and the right type of fat in the likes of France and those other countries are much higher, the good fat. The problem here is that we're taking so many bad fats into sugar, we can't process those foods.
Right.
That's really what it's down to. We're just damaging the gut wall, we're damaging the gut bacteria, and we're not able to actually deal with it.
What was it you said to me recently? You said that we know the price of things.
Yeah, people often say to me, well, I can't afford to go down to the market on on a Saturday and pick up organic potatoes or organic carrots or not organic, but just fresh carrots and that kind of stuff. But I say to people, look, people know the cost of everything, the value of nothing. So they don't look at food or what you're doing in your life on the base of cost. Look at on the base of value. And if we were to eliminate the huge amount of money that we're spending on all of the foods that are causing our illness and take that money and put it into foods that can give us better health, we'd probably end up saving money and time and effort and energy, because we wouldn't be off work half the time, we wouldn't be as tired half the time, we wouldn't need antibiotics half the time, we wouldn't need inhalers half the time. The quality and the value is much better when you sit down and measure in that context.
So it's what we're putting into our system is what's making us sick. You haven't mentioned ineffective lifestyles, though, or the changing patterns to PlayStations and handheld games and our slavery to our mobile phones that keep us sitting on our ass.
Yeah, you're dead right. I'm always saying to parents, if your child wants, look, the modern day life is technology. It's a touch of the finger, and it's touching a screen, it's this, that, and the other, and we're ordering online, and we can see people want to sit in their couch and do their thing. But, what we need is, I think we need to go back into our schools. I think we need to because the health of our society is the biggest challenge today. It's the biggest challenge for our government to put into place the mechanisms that can prevent illness. And it's not about trying to deal with the people who have illness. I mean, what do we do if somebody gets excess weight? Do we move them into a bigger home so they can get bigger again? We've got to get to the fundamental cause of the problem, and the fundamental cause is education. And what we've got to do is get into our schools and put time, effort, and money into educating kids, educating parents, as to the lifestyle change that's required if we have to have a healthier society. So spending time inside, looking at TV, watching DVDs, playing games, using all these kind of things for a period of time a day, half hour, fine. But after that, kids should be out playing. They should be involved in sport. With big national sports here, GA, the hurling, the football, whatever, rugby. So we should encourage kids to get out, encourage kids to be swimming. And I think that present economic climate, I think, is driving people into that situation anyway. It's getting them out of the house and doing a little bit more Neil.
If that were the case, then kids wouldn't need to be, and we wouldn't need to be as preoccupied with diet if there was more activity on the other side.
That's the great thing about it, because the evidence also shows that there's types of things to think about here. One is, you could be training very hard at the end of the day and eating the right food and still be very sick at the end of the day, because you're not dealing with your emotional stress or whatever the case may be. But what is really then needed is, what we need to do is, exactly, get out, take a little bit of time to relax, get a bit of exercise in, moderation, everything in moderation, the 80-20 rule. If you want to have a little bit of a treat, fine. But you think, first thing this morning, what did parents give their children? Or what did we eat ourselves? Did we have our orange juice, our Weetabix, our slice of toast with jam and tea? There's a sugary start.
Yes, it
Straight
is.
away, sugar intake. We need protein intake in the morning. The gluten-free bread or spelt bread, which are poached eggs, for example, with some porridge, that kind of stuff. You use pomegranate juice or that kind of thing. Get your tea and whatever. So it isn't rocket science that we just make the slight changes, and that's what can make the difference in. If we do make those types of changes and difference in our life,
what about all the labels about low-fat this and butter-free and all this kind of stuff?
I never buy into low-fat.
No?
I never buy into low-fat. Because the thing is, we still need the right types of fats. I say to people, look, eat creamy butter. I have a tendency to say to people who have any issues around mucus-based problems, sinus, digestive disorders, irritable bowel type syndrome, any inflammatory conditions. Remove the dairy foods, the lactose, remove the gluten out of your diet, remove the sugar. I know, and the evidence is there to prove that even within 6 weeks, the change can be absolutely huge. Absolutely.
So for somebody to make a radical change relatively fast, you're saying that it should be dairy-free and sugar-free for a period of time.
Yeah.
And what's the problem with the spartamine then? As
Well, that's
an option to sugar, or for instance, would you say maybe honey instead of sugar?
Yeah, look, the honey. Unfortunately, honey is converted as sugar as well. But you're
Right.
far better off with that than eating sugar. And I don't agree. I mean, I could reel off amount of studies that have been done on the dangers of artificial sweeteners like aspartame and stuff like that. We see it with the children who are on, these stimulants and Red Bulls and all that. We see the damage it causes and the hyperactivity in that. Xylitol is probably one of the biggest. I mean, some people use stevia, but xylitol is probably one of the best substitutes for sugar if you have to use it. But ultimately, if we can get our proper nutrition and energy from our food, then we won't crave the sugars. Because you were going back and you were talking about it there earlier, a few moments ago, about addiction and about how we crave different foods, Neil. And what happens is, if your brain, went to bed last night knowing that yesterday morning, when you got up, you took sugar after breakfast, and you had your nuggets and chips for lunch as a child or whatever, and in the evening you had maybe a sandwich. The brain says, well, look, you've been feeding me sugar for the last 10 or 15 years. I need this sugar.
It's 1 o'clock, it's time for nuggets.
Yeah. Correct, because the brain wires itself accordingly. So the key is, I would say to people, don't go on diet. Waste of time. Start looking at your lifestyle. Start taking time to relax. Start doing a bit of exercise. Diet in moderation. Cut out the rubbishy foods. Give yourself a chance. Your metabolism will function better. Your excess waste will be dropped, and you'll find that you'll maintain that over a period of time. So this is really all about education, Neil. But I can guarantee you, if we continue to take in the amount of sugar we're taking in, we're going to we have a very sick society in that context, but we're going to have a lot worse society.
Yes, indeed. I didn't mention cakes or biscuits, but of course that's also thrown into the mix. Finally, one day it's good for you, next day it's not. One day it's red wine, next day it's not. Now apparently it's omega-3s, and I can't imagine taking in fish oils being bad for you. Why do they say they are?
Look, I know you're probably talking about a recent study that came out, but and it was all over the papers. But you see, when you look into the meat of these things, now they're going to tell you stop eating fish. That's the way it is. Look, it's absolute rubbish. In Medscape, anybody can research this themselves. There was huge flaws. There was huge flaws around that study. There were 4 specific points around that study that was done recently. They were talking about how fatty acids might cause prostate cancer and all that.
Yes, that's right. It nearly scared me to death when I saw it.
And for me, because I'm advising people all the time, and the first thing I did was I spoke to a cardiovascular surgeon in the Galway clinic who I work with, Sharif Sultan, and he said, absolutely not. This is totally flawed. There's no proof of cause and effect. This is one of the key things. And the patient's intake of the omega-3 fatty acids weren't monitored at all. But the most important thing about this that was highlighted by the Medscape article by the medics there, and very important, there was a difference in the association between fatty acids and high-grade disease, prostate cancer disease. But you see, people, the difference was, which wasn't taken into consideration, these people were taking a drug called finasteride. And finasteride is taken for prostate issues. So there was huge flaws, and this absolutely, the evidence that came out the day after was that was there evidence enough to suggest that medical doctors would advise patients who have coronary conditions to stop taking omega-3s. The answer they were saying was no, and I would go along with their assessment of it. There is no proof whatsoever that omega-3 does it.
Has it anything to do with the fact that it might have more to do with St. John's wort in the past, that they want to take the omega-3s off the shelf and prescription only?
Well, you see, that's what I found it in my 24 years of life in this work, is that if they find something like St. John's wort or the likes of Doherty, which was fantastic for irritable bladder for women in particular, and what they do is, because these things are sold as a food supplement. Now, as a food supplement, there is no regulation. So the thing about it is what they say, if it's found to be of benefit, like St. John's wort, well, if it's of benefit and if it hits the multinational pocket, well, then what we do is take the food supplement off it, let's make it a medicine. That means now we can prescribe it.
Bad form.
It's the same thing again. So,
and is that why we're seeing a huge amount, billions and billions being made by drug firms for children wrongly labelled mental, have say, ADHD, for instance.
Yeah, well, it's like when you think of it, in the last 20 years, that the ADHD drug market value has grown from 11 million to 11 billion.
Crikey, massive.
In 20 years, And
is this being fed then by the industry, do you believe?
Well, you see, when we go back to what we were talking about a few moments ago, if we keep feeding ourselves and our children the wrong food, of course we're going to be hyperactive. And of course it's only a matter of time before somebody decides that we label the child this and the policy then is we put them on this. Dr. Peter Bregan, and I'll never forget his statement when I spoke with him a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, he said the biggest abuse being created in our society today is the mass drugging of our children. And I think while medicine has a huge role to play, I think we have to be very careful in how we diagnose our medical children. If children have disorders or disabilities, by all means exhaust every avenue of medical and all, but have a look at diet, have a look at what's contributing to a lot of this, social media, bullying and all that kind of stuff. But there's absolutely no doubt in my mind, and the evidence is clear, that there are children out there being labelled as having mental illnesses when they don't, being prescribed with medication that has never been tested on children, that is causing serious harm. And I think it's something that people have to take caution and be fully informed before they take those steps.
Absolutely. I would never underestimate the power of the pharmachem industry. Finally, do you believe in genetics then, or in issues being hereditary, including the weight gain issues? For instance, mental illness or schizophrenia, or genetically handed down cancer issues and things?
Professor Bruce Lipton says 95% of people are born genetically perfect. I don't think we're born with these diseases. I often think of my own, I often answer this question. My own dad unfortunately died from a stroke at 79 years of age, and my uncles and aunts and my first cousin, at 18 got a stroke. But I say, I can take responsibility for my own life. I can decide what weaknesses I might have, and I can determine, I do X, Y, and Z, I can prevent these things. What we need is to take this individual mindset, because if we take that attitude that we have, well, look, it's not my problem, it's my parents' problem.
Well, like for instance, alcoholism, for instance, that can be
absolutely. I don't believe that. I believe we all buy into that, and I think we need to get away from that big perspective of reality. We all have our own individual mind. We all decide and make decisions on what we want to do. And all we need to do is take individual responsibility. And we need to stop making excuses and start dealing with the reality. We need to get out there and educate people that things can change, no matter what the situation is. So, like as I say, we're all predisposed genetically to something. But if we can take individual responsibility and look after ourselves, those weaknesses that may be there genetically, we can overcome them. Because otherwise, as Bruce Lipton would say, where our future is determined by our heredity. But that's not necessarily the case, because what we're seeing is increases in serious illnesses that once were thought genetic, but we're seeing them so rapid that couldn't be explained by genetics alone.
And indeed, that's how the power of placebos can be unexplained either. How can somebody recover with the placebo faster than somebody recover with the supposed cure? Well, it's the power of the mind and the body healing itself, isn't it?
Well, yeah, all of that evidence is there. I mean, we look at specifically the antidepressants as we talked about in the past. There's no clinical evidence to prove that they work. It's based primarily on placebo. Now, at the higher end of the scale, yes, I mean, they're beneficial in screening cases and on bipolar and manic. But in the general run of the mill, where people are going to the doctor stressed, down, getting tired, all because of lifestyle issues, taking the antidepressant, the sleeping pill, that's not going to resolve the problem. Short-term intervention, fine. But for society's health to improve, I would still go back to the simple point. Keep it simple. Don't complicate it. Take a little time to relax. Get out, do a bit of exercise. Cut out half of the rubbing. I nearly said the word.
You nearly said the S-H-I-T-E word that you have a propensity to say. Sometimes there's no better word, incidentally.
Yeah, cut out half, very basic, excuse expressions, my apologies to the public. Cut out half of it. And look at, as people come into my clinic and they say to me this, that, and the other, I say to them, well, what's causing your problem? Well, I don't know. No, you do know. You do know what's causing your problem. Tell me. And all that people need to hear is this. Take time to relax, get out, do a bit of exercise, and no matter what your situation is, change diet, change your attitude. You'll be amazed, no matter how difficult the problems are, how things can change.
Okay, my friend, we'll talk again soon. My pleasure as always. Thanks, Michael.